The morning sun cast long shadows across Fifth Avenue as Emma Rodriguez stood outside the gleaming glass tower of Chen Industries. Her worn jacket hung loose on her thin frame, and her hands trembled, not from the cold November air, but from hunger that had become her constant companion. 3 days. That's how long it had been since she'd eaten a proper meal. Emma hadn't always been here, standing on street corners with her pride crumbling like day-old bread. 6 months ago, she'd had a job at a printing company. She'd had an apartment with actual heat. She'd had dignity. But then the company downsized and the bills kept coming. First went the apartment. Then went the food. Now here she was, watching people in $1,000 suits walk past her like she was invisible. She clutched a small cardboard sign against her chest. The words were simple. Hungry. Anything helps. God bless. Most people didn't even look at her. They were too busy staring at their phones, rushing to meetings, living lives that seemed a world away from her own. Emma understood. She'd been one of them once, hurrying past without really seeing. Now she saw everything. The waste, the abundance, the way people threw away half-eaten bagels while her stomach ached with emptiness. Around noon, the lunch crowd began to emerge. Emma watched them file out of the building's revolving doors, heading toward the sandwich shops and cafes that lined the street. The smell of fresh bread drifted from a bakery nearby, making her dizzy with want. "Excuse me," she said softly to a woman in a red coat. "Could you spare—" The woman walked faster, her heels clicking against the pavement like a dismissal. Emma tried again with an older man. "Sir, I'm just trying to get something to eat." He shook his head without breaking stride. She felt tears burning behind her eyes but refused to let them fall. Crying wouldn't fill her stomach. Crying wouldn't change anything. That's when she noticed him. A man stood near the building's entrance, tall and dressed in an expensive charcoal suit. He wasn't moving with the crowd. Instead, he seemed frozen, his dark eyes fixed on something in the distance. In one hand, he held a phone. In the other, a takeout bag from the Italian restaurant across the street. David Chen, though Emma didn't know his name yet, was having the kind of day where nothing felt real. His assistant had just confirmed his 3 o'clock with the board. His lawyer had emailed about the merger documents. His phone buzzed every 30 seconds with messages that all seemed urgent but somehow empty. He'd stepped outside for lunch because the office walls were closing in. Because sometimes even a CEO needed to remember what fresh air felt like. Then he saw her. The woman standing near the corner, holding a sign with shaking hands. Something about her struck him. Maybe it was the way she held herself, still trying to maintain some shred of dignity. Or maybe it was her eyes, which reminded him of someone he'd lost long ago. Emma gathered her courage and approached him. "Sir, I don't mean to bother you. I haven't eaten in 3 days, and I was wondering if you could spare some change. Just enough for bread. That's all I need. Just some bread." Her voice cracked on the last word. David looked at her, really looked at her, and suddenly he wasn't seeing a stranger. He was seeing his mother 20 years ago before he'd made his fortune. Before the company, before the success, before everything changed. He remembered how she'd stretched every dollar, how she'd sometimes skipped meals so he could eat, how she'd never asked for help even when they desperately needed it. "Wait here," he said quietly. Emma blinked, unsure if she'd heard him correctly. Most people said no. Some ignored her completely. No one had ever said wait. David turned and walked back into the building, leaving Emma standing there with her heart pounding. Was he calling security? Had she made a mistake approaching someone so obviously important? But 5 minutes later, he emerged again. This time, he wasn't alone. He was followed by a young man carrying several large bags. David walked straight to Emma. Up close, she could see the lines of exhaustion around his eyes, the weight of responsibility he carried in his shoulders. But there was something else, too, a softness she hadn't expected. "What's your name?" he asked. "Emma," she whispered. "Emma Rodriguez." "Emma, I'm David. I want you to have this." He gestured to the bags his assistant was holding. "There's food here. Sandwiches, soup, fruit, enough for today and tomorrow." Emma's hands flew to her mouth. "I can't. That's too much. I just needed bread." "You needed more than bread," David said gently. "And there's something else." He pulled out his phone and typed quickly. "I'm sending You the address of a friend who runs a workforce development program. They help people get back on their feet. Job training, resume help, interview close. I'm going to call ahead and tell them to expect you. Tears finally spilled down Emma's cheeks. Why are you doing this? David was quiet for a moment, looking past her toward the busy street. My mom raised me alone, he finally said. She worked 3 jobs to keep us fed. She never complained, never asked for help. One winter things got really bad. I remember coming home to find her, crying in the kitchen, because she didn't know how. We'd make rent. A neighbor, someone she barely knew, heard her and showed up with groceries and a month's worth of rent money. My mom never forgot that kindness. She told me that when you have the power to help someone, you do it. No questions, no conditions. Just help. He met Emma's eyes. She passed away 5 years ago, and every day I try to honor what she taught me. Emma accepted the bags with trembling hands. Inside, she could see containers of hot soup, wrapped sandwiches, fresh bread, yes, the bread she'd asked for, and even some fruit and cookies. It was more food than she'd seen in weeks. Thank you, she managed to say through her tears. Thank you so much. David pulled out his wallet and handed her several bills. For now. For whatever you need. Go to that program tomorrow. Give them my name. They'll help you. As Emma walked away, clutching the bags like precious treasure, David stood watching her. His assistant, Marcus, looked at him with obvious curiosity. Sir, you have that board meeting in 20 minutes, Marcus reminded him gently. David nodded slowly. Let them wait, he said. Some things are more important than meetings. He thought of his mother, of the neighbor who'd saved them all those years ago, of the invisible thread of kindness that connected strangers across time and circumstance. His phone buzzed again with urgent messages, but for once he ignored them. Sometimes the most important business wasn't conducted in boardrooms. Sometimes it happened on street corners when one person saw another, really saw them, and chose to help. Emma turned back once before rounding the corner. David was still there, watching to make sure she was okay. She raised one hand in a small wave, and he waved back. In that moment, 2 lives touched, and everything changed.